Yeah, let me start with what's going on in Qatar. We learned yesterday that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, they're going to be in Qatar, and we had the Iranian foreign ministry saying that they're going to go to Qatar, but there would be no talks between the two sides, between the two delegations. It seems from the latest report that it shows Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are going to talk with mediators, basically Qatar and Pakistan. And that frozen Iranian asset, $6 billion, is not, they have not released that. And what do we know about Qatar, and what is the main objective of Iranian delegation going to Qatar, and what is the objective of Americans being there?
Well, if you recall, a couple of months ago, they said Witkoff and Kushner and perhaps Vance are going to go to Pakistan and meet the Iranian delegation. And the Iranians were saying, we're not going to Pakistan. It was when the Iranian foreign minister was on his way to Pakistan and then to Oman and Russia, if I'm not mistaken. And the Iranians said, we're not participating, but and Trump insisted so much that this was going to happen that no matter what Iran said, many people didn't believe them. So, but ultimately there was no meeting. And if you recall, Kushner and Witkoff didn't go, and Trump said the trip is too long, and I don't know, it's an 18-hour flight or something like that. So this is similar to that. Witkoff and Kushner are going, and Trump declared that the Iranians requested a meeting. The Iranians made no such request. Americans want to meet the Iranians, and the Iranians are not going. No delegation is going today. That delegation that you're speaking of, I think, goes tonight, and it's not even the foreign minister. It's the person in charge of in the like the equivalent of a deputy minister. In charge because the foreign ministry in Iran has been restructured, so I don't know exactly what status he has, but he is going there to follow up on the issue of Iranian financial assets that have been stolen, and to have discussions with the Qataris. It has nothing to do with Witkoff, it has nothing to do with Kushner, and it has nothing to do with negotiations. As I said, not even the foreign minister is going. For such a thing to be meaningful. So some people, they've been making a big deal out of this, but there's no plan for Iran to go, regardless of no one. I mean, I'm very surprised how people, even in Iran, sometimes we see people who believe what Trump says, whereas Trump is the most dishonest person around, and it's universally acknowledged. But sometimes I'm surprised by some people here in Iran who take his word seriously. But there was no plan on the Iranian side. The Iranians didn't send a delegation today, and the delegation that is going tonight is a lower ranking delegation, which has to do with one file exclusively, and that has to do with the Qataris.
Yeah, which is basically related to that Iranian frozen asset, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. When you look at, we had Macron coming to the region and meeting with Omani government. It seems that he's seeking for some sort of, he has requested mine clearing corridor in the Strait of Hormuz, and he wants to send, I don't know, ships, these minesweepers, something like that. And is that going to be acceptable for Iran to let, even with the authorization? I don't know what is the communication, because in the recent days we've learned that Iran is communicating with Omani government. Then Omani government may have a different decision, not that much close to the Iranian ones. What is the sort of communication between the two sides?
Well, first of all, the Iranians have warned the French that they will not tolerate any French ships near the Strait of Hormuz, and removing mines is Iran's responsibility and no one else's, and that is in accordance with MOU. The Iranians, the two sides agreed that the Iranians are going to regulate the Strait of Oman, the Strait of Hormuz. And and that is, of course, now a point of contention, which I'll explain. First of all, Oman, if the Iranians go and speak with them, they say one thing. When the Americans go and speak with them, they say another, because they're intimidated by the Americans. If you recall, a few weeks ago, Trump said he'll bomb and, I don't know, destroy Oman if they don't obey. And so Oman doesn't want to get into trouble. It's not, none of these countries are like Iran. And there is no country like Iran, to be very blunt, except for Yemen. But the Iranians have said that we will we'll control the Strait of Hormuz in future after these 60 days, jointly with Oman. But during these 60 days, the strait is exclusively under the control of Iran, and it will remain so. And if Oman doesn't want to cooperate with Iran after the 60 days, Iran says it doesn't matter. We're going to control it. Then we'll control the strait ourselves. So it's up to Oman to join us or not. Now, as I said earlier, in accordance with the agreement, the Iranians are supposed to control the straits and allow shipping to go through. And then in the second month, shipping is supposed to normalize. But the Americans, as they always do, they are violating the agreement. So in Lebanon, they violated the agreement, and they did a deal with the proxy government in Beirut, the government that they installed. Does not have popular legitimacy. And the Israelis, in order to allow the Israeli regime to stay in Lebanon, to keep southern Lebanon. And of course, their proxy government in Beirut gifted southern Lebanon to the Israelis because they are basically agents of the United States. So that is one violation, because according to the MOU, the Israeli regime has to go. And Iran is not going to accept anything except a full withdrawal. Trump's threats against Iran are violations. Trump's refusal to hand over Iran's stolen assets, another violation. And the list goes on. And one is that the United States has forced Oman to declare a corridor for ships to pass through in the Strait of Oman. And Iran said, we are in charge in accordance with MOU. In other words, the Americans agreed to this. So the Iranians have warned ships not to use that corridor. And so basically, Iran and the United States are in conflict on multiple fronts because the Americans, as expected, and you and I have discussed this before multiple times, that from the very beginning, no one really believed that this MOU was going to be implemented, because the Americans never implement their side of the bargain. They're always lying. They're always cheating. They're always stealing, as Pompeo once admitted. So the Iranians are using their leverage, and that is the Strait of Hormuz. And the more the United States refrain from carrying out their obligations, the more difficult Iran is going to make it for the Americans with regards to shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. That's how it works. If the Americans force the Israeli regime out, if the Americans stop threatening Iran, if they hand over Iranian assets, then the Strait of Hormuz would be opened. But if the other side is going to lie and cheat and steal, then the Iranians are going to refrain from carrying out their obligations in response.